Hey guys, Brian here from Starlite Pulp. Thanks so much for checking in. And tonight I've got Mr. James Whelpley with us, the author of two books here. We've got Dancing in the Trap and Tenerife, both of which feature Mickey Fairfax, his PI, former merchant marine, and both are very much considered noir. So I'm really excited to have James with me tonight. And so starting off, this is interesting, and I don't know if it's interesting to anybody else out there, but it's interesting to me. All of us as writers get started differently in this field, right? It's just one of those things. No, there's no coach that ever comes to you and says, I'm recruiting you. You're coming here. You're a football player now. As writers, we have to make some conscious decision where we're like, okay, I'm going to go for this. I'm going to put myself out there. I'm going to get rejected. I'm going to write bad stuff in the beginning, all that. So how did your origin story, how did you start out as a writer, James?
I grew up in Texas, still in Central Texas. And, I was graduating high school in like the mid 90s. So that was right when like Pulp Fiction came out. Mm-hmm. And that was really the first time I had seen or I guess really noticed that, a writer and director, he kind of, Tarantino was just sort of the first person to me, and, film buffs will disagree, but he was the first person I think that became a household name as like a writer director and was doing something like stylish. And I think that captured a lot of people's imagination as to wanting to write or make film or whatever. My brother was trying to get into the acting world. Okay. And Texas at that time was really like the third coast as far as where movies were being made. Right. So, I mean, he went out and read for like some pretty big budget movies, like the Natalie Portman movie, like Where the Heart Is. And I think he read for like Miss Congeniality before they like rewrote the part. So he's bringing these like real Hollywood scripts home. And I'm reading through them and running lines with them and everything, and then seeing kind of how they're put together. And I think that was really inspirational, and that sort of made me want to write. And so I think the first thing I really tried to write was a screenplay. And it was, a terrible like buddy flick. I'm working at a sandwich shop at the time. So of course it's like three guys working at a sandwich shop and just right. meeting, low lifes and getting into hijinks. And, it's kind of funny because we're big devotees of this art house movie theater, The Village, mm-hmm. in Austin, and we'd always go see movies there. And he saw an ad in the paper for the movie Bottle Rocket, the Wes Anderson movie Bottle Rocket, and it's just three guys like standing in front of a car, obviously like in the desert, and he's just like, dude, tell me this doesn't look like a movie poster for like your screenplay. Right. And the two have nothing in common, but it really did, like that poster really did look like it could have been for what I was writing. So it was just kind of funny. And he moved out to LA and was still doing the acting thing out there, and he met a guy who was pitching a cartoon series to Cartoon Network and Comedy Central, and he's like, he has a script but it's not great, so why don't you try to write him one? So like me and him, like in 2 days, wrote like a pilot episode for this comedy show, this cartoon that never became anything, but that I think really just turned it on, and I kind of didn't stop writing after that. But then there was like a huge gap where I didn't write, and I had the first 5 chapters of Dancing in the Trap written, mm-hmm. Probably in the early 2000s. Okay. And then it wasn't until we moved to where we're living now. And we went to the public library, and my wife's like, hey, there's a writers group meeting over there. Why don't you just jump in there and see if you can join them? Went in there, and I'm still with that same group. We've got a meeting tomorrow, and they really helped me. Went in there and got a lot of positive feedback, and it just sort of, they kept me honest with getting stuff done and knocking stuff out. And yeah, like 8 months later, I had a book.
That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, I want to touch on that just for a second because I think that is such an important thing for, I don't want to say young writers because it doesn't matter what age you start writing, but right. for early writers, uh, getting your stuff workshopped is so important, because when it's your mom and your sister and your girlfriend saying, "This is really good, honey," that first off isn't helpful, and secondly, oftentimes isn't true, and you need somebody else. I for example, I got my master's from USC in professional writing, but it was every single week we had to bring something to the table, and it got looked at by everybody at the table, and you got good feedback, you got bad feedback, you got feedback you didn't want. You always had the one or two people in the class that didn't like you already, so it was like I barely even need to hear what you need to say, but and then there were others that were sometimes too positive. But the point is that you have to take all that feedback, because because if you're the only one reading your stuff thinking, "Oh, this has a chance," no.
No, that's so true. And I think I haven't met a lot of people who are fantastic at taking criticism. And I feel like I probably make more suggestions on a manuscript than anyone would like me to, because I mean, if anyone could see what I do to my own stuff, like I am so paralyzed sometimes with I can't get past a sentence. I'll just be working on the same damn sentence and write it 50 different ways. But I know that I can't move past it until I get that sentence. And but I rip my own stuff up. I mean, I tear it up. I rewrite complete chapters on a whim. I'm going back right now. I'm on chapter 19 in my current work, and I'm going back and working on chapter 1 again, because it's just that's my process, and
right.
I'm not afraid to tear myself a new one. And I guess probably sometimes I'm a little more critical than I need to be, but yeah, we've had a lot of people kind of come and go in our group, show up one time, get some criticism, and then you never see them again.
Absolutely, yeah.
But at the same time, when you're with the same cast of characters for so long, it just sort of becomes a love fest. And I feel like I know what everybody in my group is going to say about what I bring in.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, sometimes there's people at the table, like, her over there, and I know, anything I bring in, they're going to love. And then there's that one over there, and she doesn't like me at all. So that one's not going to go well. And then but at the same time, it's still good to get the feedback. It's still better than nothing. Having said that, I said that about early writers. Having said that, once you write enough and you feel comfortable enough in your own voice, I think you can start to have an idea of what will sell, what will get published, what, even if it's not great, it's something that you like, right? I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to write something that you like. And
absolutely. And I think that's maybe to my own detriment that I write the things that I want to read. And, we both of us write in a genre that's not exactly hot right now. If I wrote like, a dystopian universe, or, kid wizards or sexy vampires, it'd probably sell more than, zombies. Writing about people that think, my books are taking place like in the 40s, because, the guy's, makes wisecracks like a vaudevillian or whatever. But I couldn't. I can't. Like, one, I know the voice that I'm writing in now is my voice, and for me to write any other way is going to have to be an effort for me to not write in Mickey Fairfax's voice.
Right.
But I want to do that. There's other things I want to write other than this, but I can tell that that's my truest voice, and so that's sort of where I started. I think I just got off on a tangent. I forgot what the question was.
It's all good. It's all good. I want to throw out there that it's interesting too, because I in this review that we're putting out, I wrote a story for it, and it was the first story. I swear it's the first story in probably 15 years that I wrote in first person, and it was like, wow, it is so freeing, because when you're third person omniscient, you're still giving out bits and pieces of information, and of course you have the ability to be far more eloquent when you want to, that a narrator might not be, but boy, you can really kind of just nibble out those bits of information in first person that you feel kind of guilty about not doing in third person. But yeah, so that was a really interesting experience because, like I said, I haven't done it in forever, and first person was like, wow, this is different. So
I think that seems to me like the truest voice to use is like the third person omniscient narrator. Like that, man, that's almost too much power, like to give someone, and then you feel like you have to describe like every
yeah. See, and that's the thing. So then it becomes a thing of, how much do I give up and how much don't I? How much description do I need to give here versus, can we just move on with what's been said? So, all right. So talk to me about, you have Dancing in the Trap, you have Tenerife, right?
Yep.
Both Mickey Fairfax. So what do you got going on in the future?
Right now, work in progress is the third installment of the Mickey Fairfax trilogy, I guess, at this point. It's called The Toxic Blonde. We've taken Mickey from Tenerife. Like Dancing in the Trap ends, and Tenerife picks up right where Dancing in the Trap ends. The last chapter in Dancing in the Trap is the prologue for Tenerife. In the same way, the last chapter in Tenerife is the prologue for Toxic Blonde. A character from Tenerife has taken Mickey to Belgium, this time to Brussels. The travel aspect was really important to me. That's kind of what I wanted to do. Whenever you're writing genre fiction, you want to put your own spin on it somewhere. Like, you can't break all the rules because then you're just not in that genre anymore.
Right,
but
exactly.
That was one thing that I really wanted to mess with, not only because I love travel novels, I love Rick Steves, and anyone that's gone anywhere, I'm fascinated by. But I also like the Agatha Christie novels, where the kind of self-contained ones, or sometimes it was Poirot, but they would travel. It was like Murder Mesopotamia, or Death on the Nile. And she had like these great locales, and I always thought she kind of left some meat on the bone there. Like, they went to these great places, but it really didn't factor into the story at all. It was still a bunch of English people and somebody died.
Right.
And the place didn't really seem to matter. So I wanted to try to make it matter. So I wanted, Dancing in the Trap to have very Parisian things in it. And I wanted, Tenerife to kind of speak of that place. Tenerife's crazy because it has like every geological formation known to man. It has like a volcano and a glacier. Like, who has that? I wanted to make sure that I got that in there. But the bigger thing was trying to tweak the genre. It was, I grew up reading Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and Ross MacDonald, and their titular detectives were always like very connected to the town they were in. And we were talking earlier about just how noir in general just seems to emanate from LA and Hollywood and San Francisco and New York. So they're so enmeshed in that town, like they know all the streets, they know all the gangs, they know all the policemen and the lawmen, and they've got friends and enemies. I wanted to kind of take the detective like out of that and plunk him somewhere where he didn't know anybody and didn't know anything, and sometimes not even know the language, and just kind of play with what shortcomings and what obstacles that would kind of put in front of him, and just also just sort of make it a little different.
Yeah, and you did in both. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you did. I love it. It's interesting. See, part of the reason that like my first book, Trunk Full of Zeros, which I know you read and you've commented on, and I appreciate it. But that was LA, and so even in that, I felt like when I was planning it out, I felt like I had to pick parts of LA that were the least known I could think of. So we went down to the African American district where all the jazz clubs were. We went to the Hollywood Stars game, which I've never heard of anybody writing about that. It was a minor league team before the Dodgers, and the Angels came, but then there was still the Stars for a little bit, and it's where the farmers market is now for people that know LA. But it's one of those things where I literally tried to pick locales that were so not known, because we all know so much about LA. I mean, I even grew up in LA, so I know it anyway, but we know so much about LA from Chandler and from so much noir that we've seen over the years. And that's why in the new Sunny Stories, I chose Palm Springs, because again, is Palm Springs Paris? No, certainly not. Don't get me wrong. But but it's not LA.
Right.
And it's taking it in this fun little area in the early 50s where Hollywood had their 90-mile rule, right? So anybody that was on set couldn't be further than 90 miles away, but Palm Springs is less than that. So they would vacation in Palm Springs, and then the mob also vacationed in Palm Springs, but it was looked at as a quote-unquote neutral site because women and children were there. So you weren't supposed to do mob business there. You were just supposed to vacation. And then, so there's all this kind of fun stuff going on in the early 50s to go along with, the architecture there and stuff like that. So that's why I chose that. But again, it all goes back to that same thing of, we know New York noir, we know LA noir. And so what you did is take it international, which is awesome. And I took it to Palm Springs. So
yeah, that's awesome. I like Ross McDonald was another writer who I'd love and read everything he's done, and he made up a city. And I don't know why it's like I'm brain farting on the name of that city now, but I thought it was funny that Sue Grafton picked it up, and she used his fictional California city and just kind of kept it going.
That's very cool.
That made me like her immediately. As soon as I read that, I'm like, hey.
Right. Yeah, no, that's very cool. You know who else? You mentioned Agatha Christie. When I always watch a Bond film, the Daniel Craig ones, which I've liked a lot, and then the 20 years before that where I didn't like any of them. But still, every time you watch a Bond film, I feel like you go to 6 or 7 different countries.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fun aspects about it, is you feel like you get to, partially see and travel to all these different places without actually having to go there and get shot. But yeah, that's what made me think of that when you say, and in fact, I just saw, you might have too, but I just saw Death on the Nile this past year.
Yeah.
The Branagh film, and that was pretty good. Again, it did have the one anywhere. It did have the one archaeological site, right? Did have that. Otherwise, it was all on a boat, but still.
Yeah, it could have been a stage play. I bought a book at a garage sale that was Ian Fleming, and he wrote, James Bond, and it was his travel writing.
I've actually seen that.
British publication. It was called Six Sexy Cities or something, and I still have it back there in the room. But yeah, his travel writing was crazy because it's kind of great. It's sort of like Anthony Bourdain a lot. He goes to places that your Rick Steves and your Rudy Max aren't going to go with their tour buses. He's drinking Singapore slings in like an opium den, and
exactly
having an extra kind of R-rated adventures.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to read it, and you just see it's so natural for him.
Well, with Bourdain, he's also eating things that I wouldn't even go anywhere near. But
no sea cucumbers for you.
But still, I appreciate him doing it. That's for sure. Okay, so let's for a second talk influences, because I know that you're a real kind of I don't know, you're very well read in the noir genre, and I appreciate that. And we all know Hammett, we all know Chandler, Ross McDonald certainly, all great writers, phenomenal. Jim Thompson personally is probably my favorite. Not necessarily critically appreciated and not appreciated in the same sense of Chandler or Hammett or even McDonald, who all had their famous PI, right? Whether it's Marlowe or Lou Archer or Sam Spade or whatever it might be, they all have their guy, right? Thompson never had that, unless you're talking Lou Ford, his murderous sheriff. So I feel like he never quite got the due that he was deserved, but even him in this day and age, most people who read noir know Jim Thompson. So so who are some guys that you really like in the genre that maybe aren't the first people that get mentioned?
I've found some people recently who I absolutely love, and they're huge, but I just don't know that they're household names. Like, I mean, even James Lee Burke. You kind of you come across these guys and you've never heard their names, but then they've had 3 or 4 movies made from
right
in their books, and they have 80 novels, and you're like, well, God, how have I not found this person before now? Lauren Esselman is another one who I just ran across, who I really dig. He's got a couple different characters. time period I like, old Hollywood. He did a standalone book called Gas City, which I thought was really, really great, and I did a post on it.
One of the things that I love about Burke in particular, well, he has two main characters, right? There's Billy Bob Holland,
Robichaux.
and then there's Dave Robichaux. And I've read, I swear to you, I think I've read every Dave Robichaux book there is, or listened to one of the two, every single one. Whereas the Billy Bob Holland, not so much. Okay, but one of the things that Robichaux does such a phenomenal job of, that we were just talking about, is bringing the place into the writing. Like when he's down in Louisiana, it's New Iberia, and then New Orleans when he goes into that, or Lafayette or what have you. But you really feel like, and even when he goes up to Montana in some of the like Black Cherry Blues and some of the others, you really get this sense of place all throughout the work. Like it's just embedded in everything that is there, and I love that about him.
I think he's the most literary writer in that genre. If you want to lump him in with, because he writes a detective serial, if we want to lump him in there, but I mean, he's the most literary writer of that I can think of. His stuff, I mean, when you're reading it, you almost feel like you're not reading a detective noir anymore. You feel like you're reading, literature. You feel like you're reading Steinbeck. I mean, those guys are just part and parcel. He just writes beautiful, beautiful sentences, and then turns around and has a grisly murder. Yeah. But I think that's I think we've gotten too far away from trying to write like beautiful sentences, and I always it's just done to death with how sparse Hemingway's style was, and that's what I always point to, is it's a great American prose writer. And I don't like that. And you can't have like a word sandwich. You can't just have like a thesaurus on every word, and you wind up with something that's just ridiculous. But I came from before I wrote anything, I wrote poetry, and like yourself, and that's what I wrote in college. There were writing courses in college, and I was actually like afraid to take them, because I'm like, because I know myself, and I'm like, as soon as it's assigned, I'm not going to want to do it. So I didn't want to write. I didn't want to take a fiction writing class for that reason, because I didn't want to hate it. I didn't want to resent it.
Interesting. Okay.
So I took like 3 poetry classes.
I love that. See, that's interesting, because I actually, for me, it had kind of it was the opposite, because one of the things I felt like that really helped me as I got older, and helped me to kind of actually become a writer as opposed to wanting to be one, was in the master's program when I was at USC, there would be deadlines. And it was like, I got to show up to class and I have to have this. Like, I have to deliver this short story. It's not just a, oh, I'd like to write it, I'll put it off till next week. There's 8 people at that table waiting for me to have a story. So I need to work on this, And so it was that was a real lesson for me, and what it taught me, interestingly enough, was that I did well with deadlines. Like, it was all of a sudden, I need to have this done. Boom, I'm gonna knock this out.
Man, good on you.
One of the things that, I mean, for me, one of the things I think we both talked about from time to time on Instagram is James Crumley. I really like some of the James Crumley. The Last Good Kiss is, first off, one of the greatest titles ever. But The Wrong Case is also excellent. There's a couple by him I don't like as much, but he, Crumley with a C. If nobody's heard of him and you're watching this, look him up. He's outstanding. He's got some really good stuff. It is modern-ish, 80s, 90s, but really good stuff. Really good stuff. And
I like the last couple of people that we talked about, because they sort of get away from that like Mickey Spillane, hyperbolic tough guy, where he's going to walk into the room and he's going to like kick any 3 men's ass, and he lays every woman he comes across. And whenever I'd read something like that, like, okay, if you're like a 13, 14-year-old kid, that's just the best thing ever.
Right.
As soon as you're 16 or 17, you're like, man, come on, that's a little much.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And that I'm sure you do this as well, but whenever I come up with a main character like I've got Sonny Haynes right now. Is he a tough guy? Yeah, he is a tough guy, but he's so flawed. I mean, there's so much wrong with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That because I always felt like writing that guy, that perfect character. That's one of the things that made Marlowe so lovable was, he had these morals that even people in the time thought were antiquated and kind of weird. And, he'd end up spending the night by himself all the time and at his chessboard back in his apartment playing chess against himself.
Yeah. And he took it on the chin. They took it on the chin and they never got paid. The person that hired him was always the bad guy. He never gets paid. He never winds up with the girl.
Yeah, it's true.
A lovable loser through all of it.
Yeah, pretty much. And yet he is a lovable loser without question. But the thing that made Marlowe so special was that he was also so dignified in it. Like he was the knight errant that just always got overlooked. And so you always had this respect for him, even though he didn't get the girl, he didn't get paid.
He deserved all those things.
And he took a beating at some point, but still. Yeah.
That was kind of a genesis for Mickey Fairfax, really. Okay. Because I kind of looked at the trope that was being repeated kind of over and over with all these characters, and it was they're usually ex-cops, like Sonny's an ex-cop, because it's a really fruitful thing, because your guy has to, you kind of have to give him a certain set of skills where he's going to be able to solve crimes and fight evil. So they're usually ex-cops or ex-military, but then there's always a reason that they leave the force. Either the force was corrupt, or they saw something bad in war, and so it gives you this idea that there's this law of man, but there's something higher than that this white knight is ascribing to. And I was very dissatisfied with a lot of the motivations that I saw main characters have. It's like they were doing the right thing, but they were sort of doing it for selfish reasons. The one I hate the most is the one I call the "not without my daughter" plot line. And it's where some Iranian terrorist in a cave somehow knows this FBI guy who's on his case, and he goes and kidnaps the daughter or something. Or just over and over again, heroes are having their daughters kidnapped, and that's why they're doing this. And it's kind of silly, because it really, they're not doing the right thing to do the right thing for right thing's sake. They're doing the right thing for a completely selfish reason, for and it becomes revenge fantasy. It's not even justice anymore. It's revenge fantasy. And so I wanted to create a character where you kind of saw where his moral compass came from. So Mickey is an orphan who is raised by nuns. Because I thought that's the perfect thing, right? He's not going to have parents that could instill in him racism or and bigotry and these kind of terrible things, and that's sort of where you get that. So I wanted to have this on paper kind of nice Judeo-Christian upbringing. But it still works, because then he has kind of an Oliver Twistian sort of origin story. But he's completely concerned through both books with parentage, with family, which kind of gets back to a Ross McDonald. Ross McDonald always had these problems with someone wasn't who they said they were. They were someone's daughter, but they really weren't, or someone's son when they really weren't.
Right. That
got played out again and again in his books. And I think that's just sort of seeped into my subconscious now. But he's very concerned with family structure and all these adventures that he gets into. So in Dancing in the Trap, he meets the kind of femme fatale, and she also sort of has this parentless upbringing, and then in Tenerife, he's all of a sudden thrust into a family dynamic with this warring brother and sister, and
right,
their problems. And so it kind of got both sides of the coin there. And in Toxic Blonde, he's sort of in the midst of a sister war. So family's kind of a thing that keeps coming up with him, even though he has no idea of family. But I wanted him to be, and very important to me that he was an orphan, that he was raised in a Christian upbringing. Also that he was worldly but not educated.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where him being a merchant marine, a former merchant marine,
Sure.
came in.
Yeah,
And then I kind of use that same trope, like there's a reason he's not a merchant marine anymore, and it is kind of this righteous reason. So it kind of, again, kind of elevates him above the people
sure.
that he's dealing with.
Yeah, very cool. One last thing I want to bring up, just because as we were talking authors there, one guy that I think gets overlooked all the time, and he's not a noir writer. He did write some noir, but he's not a noir writer. But is just one of my very, very favorite writers is Jim Harrison, who passed a few years ago. And
Harrison.
he wrote Legends of the Fall,
Yeah.
which is excellent. But he did something which even then was rare. Now it's even more rare. But is he put out a book of 3 novellas? Right, it had 3 novellas. Legends of the Fall was the first. Obviously, that one was very successful. But the second one is named Revenge, and it actually got made into a movie as well.
Kevin Costner movie.
Kevin
That's
Costner
a great
got
movie.
it.
That's a great movie.
Exactly, and
Brutal.
trust me when I tell you the novella is better. I mean,
Wow.
if you have the opportunity to read that, pick it up because it is so good. And again, it's a novella, so it's like 100 pages, 90 pages. But Anthony Quinn is so good in that, and Costner's great, and Madeline Stowe I think is in it.
So,
yeah, so really good movie. But and I mean that story is noir. I mean that's that without question, and that's
brutal story.
Oh, it is, yeah. So anyways, if you have the opportunity, check that out because it is fantastic. And just talking about it like this is going to make me go back and read it.
I kind of got disappointed, when I had read all the Hammetts and I had read all the Chandlers and I had read all the McDonald's. I went searching for more people in that vein, and I think you had a post about the Otto Penzler pulp, like the one that's like as thick as a phone book.
Mm-hmm.
I had that same anthology, and going through that, I was really disappointed at kind of what was in there. And for a while I almost gave up looking because I'm like, I just felt like the writers that were in there were so far below Chandler and Hammett. Like those 2 guys just did that character so well. I mean, Sam Spade and Marlowe are almost mirror images of each other. And I was looking all around for someone that was going to be like that, and I just had this dry spell for like years. And then I started reading other things, like started reading Graham Greene and Kurt Vonnegut, and heavies like that. And but then now with the explosion of the internet, now it's just too easy to find a million people, and I found people like a Norbert Davis, and who I think we both like, and we're the Ben Shaley character. And now it's just almost too easy. Like I'm finding like another person I need to read everything by, every week.
Right.
So it's a high cotton days for me.
Right. Okay, so I want to give a quick update for anybody out there watching with regards to the Starlite Pulp review, the first one. Submissions are closed for it. We've read all of the stories. Mr. James Whelpley here has a story in it called The Boss's Daughter. It's excellent, and but I want to say that first off, anybody who submitted, whether it was accepted or not, thank you so much for the submission. Appreciate it. And it was my treat to go through. And I wasn't the only reader, by the way, but it was my treat to go through like 60, 70 plus submissions. And a lot of really difficult choices. We took 12 stories. And
wow, out of 70,
we took 12 stories, and they're every single one of them I feel like is really good, and we've got everybody from people who have been in Best American Mystery Stories before and won national awards and been up for Seamus Awards. To we've got one guy in there who's it's his first ever publication, which is awesome, and I had no idea of that when I just thought it was a great story. So so that's very cool. So I'm looking forward to that. Hope to have it out in about a month and a half, and anyway, I just wanted to let you guys know. Thank you so much for everybody that submitted. If it didn't make the cut, there were about a handful that literally it was like, is it this one or this one? I have 2 here. I have 1 here. I was getting advice from the other editors, and it was like, okay, and so that part of it was hard because I've done this before. Funny enough, I've worked at the Southern California Anthology actually for a few years, but I was never the one in charge of saying yes, no, So it was I was always one of the editors, so it was a different experience, and it was awesome, and one that I look forward to in the future also. But it was also a little daunting, to do that. So thanks to everybody, thanks to James as well, and so anyway, that'll be coming out. We'll let you guys know as that gets closer. So James, we brought this up. Well, actually, you brought this up when we were talking about topics for this, but it seems to me like, or it seems to both of us, that there is a cheapening maybe of human life and violence in cinema and certain other aspects of things these days. And if you look back at the novels that we so often reference, right, the Ross McDonalds, the Marlowes, the Sam Spades, even though I just mixed authors and characters there, you'll oftentimes, you wouldn't see more than maybe 2 dead bodies in a book.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think Red Harvest, I think you might have 5.
Red Harvest was,
Red Harvest
was probably one of the bloodiest ones back then, yeah. And nowadays, I don't know about from a writing perspective per se, because I'm trying to think of some of the guys we've been mentioning, the James Lee Burks. Even if you get into like the Reacher series and Lee Child and stuff like that, there's some death, but it's not, ultra gratuitous or anything. But some of the stuff that we're seeing in movies right now with John Wick and things like that, and I know you wanted to touch on that. So why don't you go first, and then I'll piggyback.
Yeah, I was listening to your conversation with the American Pulp guys probably a couple weeks ago when that first aired, and you talked about Jim Thompson and how kind of brutal his stuff is. And I mean, written in the 50s, but I mean, it's still brutal today. But even then, you have like 1 or 2, murders in a book where John Wick, some guys kill his dog and he probably kills 60 people in that movie. I mean, you take Saving Private Ryan, and even with the scene at Omaha Beach, it's probably about the same body count as a John Wick movie. And the thing that occurred to me while that was happening, and the way you can't do that, you couldn't do that in literature, because every time somebody dies, you have to kind of write about it like before and after. You got to set it up, and then it happens, and then you got to kind of navel gaze and explore the feelings behind it, and you just couldn't do that with a body count like they're racking up. And I think we both touched on the fact that it kind of probably stems from video games, where most of these like first person shooter games, the whole point of the game is you're just mowing down everything on the screen.
Yeah.
So Wick or whether it's The Matrix, both Keanu Reeves movies, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but they're mowing down all these people, and the people that they're laying waste to are just nameless, faceless henchmen, all dressed the same, no backstory. So when they're dead, you don't care, right. It's this anonymous thing, and I think that's really cheap, and it's really convenient to not thrust any like bad feelings. Like no one's going to look at John Wick and he's not a murderer. He's righteously killing them because they're the bad guys,
right?
And that's really cheap and convenient too. That you can have like this character who gets to play like judge, jury, and executioner, and it reminds me of the line from True Lies where they shoot Arnold full of the sodium pentothal, and they like, "Have you killed people?" And I don't know if it's his daughter or it's Jamie Lee Curtis. They're like, "Have you killed people?" And he said, "Yes, but they were all bad." And that's so easy. It would be so easy.
Yeah.
Life would be so easy if you just knew who the good guys and the bad guys were, like right from the bat. Maybe you could do that and just blindly massacre the bad guys.
Well, also I think that it and I'm not defending it here at all, but I think that from a literature standpoint, it would get really boring. It's the visual aspect of it that gets to people as it is. The people that really like it, it's the visual aspect. Like if you or I were writing a story and we do double taps on 12 guys' heads in a row, that's not, that's first off, it's easy to write as hell, and secondly, it doesn't do anything for you as a reader. It doesn't. It doesn't even move the story along. You could do one double tap and it does the same thing. So, it's one of those things that I hate to sound. I know we're going to sound to some people like two old guys on our porch, yelling "Get off our lawn," but it has to do with video games, right? I mean,
I can't see it any other way. I mean, I can't trade. You don't see that in movies like in the 70s or further back than what, like Duck Hunt and Nintendo came out in what, like 80, 88 or something. You just don't see it in movies before that. And it whenever you kill someone in a video game, whether their body blinks a couple times and then it disappears, like what an incredible way to alleviate. What an incredible way to make that. It's so poetic. It makes it just meaningless. That loss exactly. of life. Yeah, it's not a real life. It's digits on the screen, but I just have to believe that affects people in some way. And we've got kids who are simulating Omaha Beach in their homes like every day for 2 hours at a time. Everyone's got their little Call of Duty time to play, and it's not everyone that plays those games is going to turn into a psycho and go shoot up the school or whatever. Yeah. But you can certainly see like the comparisons there. And I really wonder if Kyle Rittenhouse, who decided to take a machine gun and play vigilante and walk into a street, he probably thought, I'm going to go play hero. I'm going to get my gun and I'm going to lace up. I bet he was wearing combat boots. I swear to God, I bet all my baseball cards he was wearing combat boots, which just totally points to premeditation. But, he puts on his Holy Avenger outfit and goes out into the street. And when he gets out there, I bet the first thing that occurred to him is, wow, this isn't like the video games at all. There's people everywhere and I can't tell who's a good guy and who's a bad guy. And now everyone's looking at this guy walking down the street with a machine gun. And now all of a sudden they're the good guy and they're looking at a bad guy. So you don't get the in real life, you don't get the incredible advantage of just knowing that everything on the screen is something that needs to die. And it has to seep into psychology somewhere. It has to.
Well, and like you mentioned in our little pre-chat, when a lot of times in the video games, when you shoot people, they disappear.
Yeah. What a wonderful.
You don't need to. You don't wound them in the side, shooting them 3 times, and they're screaming for their mom for 15 minutes as they're bleeding out. They just disappear, and that's
peaceful Christian death. Disappear.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. There's just it concerns me because we're seeing this correlation. I'm going to try my damnedest to stay out of every politic here possible. Just know that beforehand. But it just seems like we're seeing such an uptick in things like school shootings, or mall shootings, or blank shootings, whatever, church shootings, temple shootings, whatever. And there has been an obviously serious uptick in first-person shooter games in the last 20 years. And it seems, and probably also more access to weapons that are capable of doing that kind of damage, right?
Yeah.
So you add all those up, and it almost seems silly to not make the connection. I mean,
like there's always been violence, and there's always going to be violence. And I'm sure in ancient times, somebody ran into the agora with a scimitar and stabbed a couple people before you could dogpile them. But I mean, that's just the thing. Like if that was the extent of it, if a guy could only stab a couple people before we dogpiled him, that'd be great. But now anybody can go waste 20 people in under a minute. It's we've gone to, like, no one should have that power.
Yeah. And we, as artists who not only write our own work but read a whole bunch of others, I wonder what kind of impact and what kind of influence and even some kind of I don't know. I don't know. Blame isn't right, but acknowledgement at some point of, what kind of responsibility do we take for the work that we're putting out there and the level of violence that we're exposing people to.
Yeah, I was mindful of that, and I have some deaths in Dancing in the Trap, but I wanted them to mean something. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted them to be, they get focused on both kind of the big deaths, the one that happens up front with Adrian, and then later the actress Marguerite gets shot on stage. Uh, and I look at those deaths and I wanted them to mean something. They mean something to Mickey. They mean something to the main character, but I also kind of wanted them to mean something to the reader too. So it wasn't cheap. It's not a body count. It's
Right.
they're deaths, and they're meaningful deaths.
Well, and and when you're writing noir, which both of us do, people are going to die. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just
decent deaths.
that's a part of it, but that's also a part of the human existence and human life. What we're not doing is going around writing scenes where 10 people die, 12 people die. I mean, that's the kind of thing that generally speaking, probably 90% of the time, it's one person that is dying, and that then lays the foundation for oftentimes the rest of the book.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah.
it took it sort of changed it. And you were talking about this earlier, where you used to watch a movie and the person that was killing everybody was a bad guy, and it's now like we watch a movie and the person killing everybody is a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of took it and it took the meaning of taking a life, and I think it like elevated it to that it was somehow this ultimate form of freedom, or this ultimate symbol of exerting your will on the world,
Mm-hmm.
that you were going to do this irrevocable thing, and no one could stop you, and you were going to do it as many times as you had to get to the top. You killed my dog, I'm going to kill 30 guys to get to you. Not thinking that just one of those guys. Tell me, one of those guys that John Wick killed, that wasn't like his first day on the job. They didn't just give him his henchman uniform, and he was like, "Oh, honey, I'll be home."
Right.
Get up. It's my shift ends at 7, and at 6:58, the guy just wants to go home and eat his pot pie. And John Wick plugs him.
And he has a wife and 4 kids, and has no idea about his fucking dog. None.
Nope. No, never seen him. Doesn't know anything. It's his first day, and he's taking a bullet for it.
That's by the way, that's a short story right there.
Right.
I'm the first guy to die on my first day. I don't have a name, but I have a wife and 3 kids, and I get shot 3 times in the head.
There was a story, I think it was in that giant Pulp Fiction omnibus, and it was I think it was a Western, and it was kind of about this little guy who he's in sort of like this Wild West saloon thing, and he keeps getting intimidated by these gunslingers.
Mm-hmm.
And he keeps bowing down to him and everything, and he's just so afraid. He doesn't want to get shot. He doesn't want to die. And then finally, one of the guys shoots him, and I think he takes it in the shoulder, and he's like, "That's it." He's like, "That's what I was worried about this whole time," and it just like frees him of this fear of being shot. He's like, "That's it. That's all." I don't think I laughed out loud when I read it.
Right. That's great. Oh, by the way, I want to let you know. It's probably never happened to you before. Maybe it has. I have no idea, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you that, where is it? Wait, I got to find it. Hang on. So my favorite line from The Boss's Daughter was, if being an asshole is a death sentence, then we're all in trouble. And that made me laugh out loud because
yeah, I like a good one-liner.
Yeah. All right, man. So we're gonna close it out here. Hang out here with me afterwards. But we've got the Toxic Blonde coming out from James maybe next year.
Definitely next year, probably mid.
Okay.
I'm hoping by end of summer.
Okay. And then we got Dancing in the Trap. We got Tenerife. Both of his books, both Mickey Fairfax, both noir. He also has a story in the review coming out shortly, and look forward to that. I'll let you guys know more about that when it comes out. James, thanks so much for being on here tonight with us. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a good time. And let's go ahead and see you guys at the next one. In this topsy-turvy